what type of leash and what type of collar and what do I need to get my dog outside. Hey, it's Gary with Natural Instinct Dog Training, and I want to make this first addition to the Adventure series about some really basic stuff. Now, it may not seem as basic as we think. You know, you walk into the pet stores, you go online and you start looking at leashes and collars and all of this stuff, and you really don't know where to start. I mean, what type of leash and what type of collar and what do I need to get my dog outside and go for walks and go for adventures and go out to restaurants and things like that. So I want to go over a few basic things when it comes to different types of leashes and collars. I'm obviously not going to cover all of them now, because one thing that's not on this table is a retractable leash. If you want to see something gruesome, Google retractable leash injuries. It's not on the dogs, it's on the people. The dogs can get hurt too. You know, that thin little nylon string, that little nylon strap, the dog takes off and it hit wrapped around your leg, it's gonna cut through like a hot knife in butter. You wanna stay away from those. It seems like something that you could use to allow your dog to have a little more freedom and so on. And that kind of segues into the first part of this is to leash or not to leash. You know, you're going out on an adventure, you're going on a hike, and you know, your dog does pretty good, and well, they stay with you when you're around the house, but it doesn't mean that if they see a squirrel or a rabbit or another dog or somebody just across the way handing out treats that they won't have the impulse to go. So in other segments in the Adventure series, we're going to talk about impulse control, the leave it command, ways to work with your dog to help them to know that they need to look to you for guidance before they just make a decision. But when it comes to all of our different leashes, you know, we've got that good old standard traditional nylon leash. And you just clip this sucker on and we're ready to go. Now, granted, these things work pretty good. You know, some are better than others. You know, this one that I have, it's got kind of soft edges to it, so when it's in your hand, if it slides through, it's not gonna feel like it's cutting into you. But it's nylon, so it's going to burn your hands if it pulls too hard. Then you've got things that are cotton based. This looks like such a cheap little leash, but it's made well. It's sewn together good. It's actually a cotton blend. If I get it in my hands, it's not gonna slip and it's not gonna burn me. The walking quote unquote collar of choice is usually just a flat collar. And there's people out there that will say that the flat collar is the way to go. The problem with the flat collar is it really just has one job. This collar's job is right here, is to hold this tag so your dog's rabies certification and their phone number to call you, anything like that, that is attached to this collar. Now there's different GPS track collars and things like that out there, but our traditional collars, this is what this is for. You know, maybe it's a quick handle to grab a hold of your dog and it holds the tag. If you're walking your dog and you're clipped on here and your dog is pulling, all of that pressure is right up against her trachea. People will say that, well, you don't want to use chokers, you don't want to use slip leads, things like that, because that'll choke a dog. Their trachea is right in the front, just like on us. So when you're pulling that dog to try to stop them from pulling you, you're putting all of that pressure right up against their trachea. These are good tag holders. One of my favorite go-to items, and this is the number one item that I use with the boy. Yeah, you know what this is. You have one. This is, there's a particular brand. This one is the Terrain Dog brand. There's also the EZYDOG LUCA leash that I really like as well. I want to know that they're made well, that they're stitched together well. It's not just some big plastic clamp. I can see the stitching on these leashes. The rope itself has got a nice soft feel. But what's most important is this stopper works. A lot of people don't know what the stopper's for. You put it on the dog. I'm gonna slide this stopper down, not to make it tight, but it keeps the leash from accidentally loosening up. Rudy. So it's just a quick slip, boom, it's on. This is what I use when I'm out on the road, when we go hiking. This is my #1 go-to. It's not the only leash that I use, but it's my #1 go-to. Mainly because I know once I put this on, the dog's not gonna slip out, they're not gonna get loose, and I have control of what's going on. People will call this a choker. The reality is, when you put it on the dog, yes, when I pull this, it can get smaller, but at least the pressure that I'm pulling with is distributed evenly all the way around the dog's neck. Those flat collars, remember, if I pull on 5 pounds here, that 5 pounds is broken down evenly all the way around. If I'm pulling with 5 pounds of pressure against the dog's neck, all 5 pounds is going right up against her trachea. It's not gonna be comfortable for the dog. The other thing with our flat collars, Rudy, I need my model, is with our flat collars, we want them loose enough, because if you're leaving these collars on your dog, and if you weren't home and they got caught on something, you want to know that it will slip off of their head. If you have them on super tight where they can't slip out of them in an emergency, they can really get hurt, and you're nowhere around to help with that. So any type of collar, technically you want to know that in an emergency they can get out of it if you're not around. The different training tools. EZYDOG makes one of my favorite Martingale type collars. This basically works very similar to the slip leash. When I pull this, it does get smaller. This won't slip off the dog. But any type of action collar, I don't care if it's prong collar, choke collar, Martingale collar, any type of action collar or training device that if it's pulled, it constricts or gets smaller, they're never left on the dog unattended. This seems like a nice, simple little collar, but if you weren't home and the dog jumped up and maybe got caught on one of the knobs on the cabinet or the back of a chair, they can panic and constrict themselves to where, yeah, something bad might happen. Action collars never stay on the dog. That's what our flat collars are good for. When this gets pulled, it doesn't get smaller. We can adjust it and make it smaller, but it won't just slide and get smaller. And in a bad situation, the dog can get out of it, which is what's most important. The LUCA leash from EZYDOG. This is a, I don't want to say fancy version of a traditional slip leash, but made extremely well, sewn very well, good solid rope, great connections. So it does work just like a traditional slip leash. But you can also take this leash, and it has a stopper on it. So the stopper right here, I can stop how small this collar goes. So if I want to make sure, and this one's brand new, so I want to make sure that it doesn't get too tight. Now I can adjust that to the size of my dog's neck, so when I pull on it, it'll only get so tight. It will never get too tight. You can also take these. Rudy, you're my guinea pig. You can take these, and now I can take this and put this over Rudy's head and over his snout. So we're now working very similar to a, you could say, a gentle leader type leash. Gives me a little control. You can quickly change it back to a normal slip leash. And just like with any slip leash, and really any collar, there's always the old school dog trainer's trick. I can do that. It just adds a point of attachment. It's not really my go-to. There's harnesses that EZYDOG makes that do that. Similar. Rudy, let's see if we can remember how to put this on. Come here. There we go. This goes around. Has a loop on the back. All right, model dog. On this other side, There we go. If we pull this, it makes that harness get a little tighter. It just gives us a little more of a secure feel. And when we're out doing things, sometimes when I take Rudy on hikes by himself, where I'm doing long line stuff with him, I'll use that one because I can hook the long line to it really easily. I even use this one sometimes if we got a hike to out where we're gonna go paddle boarding, I'll put this on up under his vest. My next, Rudy, favorite harness, this is the EZYWALK harness. Now these harnesses, a lot of people get confused and they will put them on like this. Rudy, come here. This is probably not adjusted for you, but we'll do it anyway. This harness goes on, loops under. Look at that, close enough. But our leash connects right here in the front. So then if the dog's pulling, it gives us a little more control over where the front of our dog is facing. So then we can kind of have a better conversation with them and help them understand, hey, I want you to stay connected to me. The EZYDOG handy leash, another favorite tool. I'll even use this sometimes when I'm hiking with all three of the dogs because I can loop all three leashes in here. It gives me, in a way, a hands-free feel, but also if your hands aren't really strong or if you're trying to do other things, this goes with me every time we go hiking, and I'll just hook it on my belt because I can quickly hook it on the end of a leash, and now I don't have to pay as much attention because it's not going to come loose. These are really designed for hikers or joggers. There's some leashes out there like these. EZYDOG's great products. I've been using their products for 10, 15 years now, and I trust them, I believe them. I've been using these for almost 10 years. And lots of clients, I had clients that had tendencies to drop their leash during group classes, and I tell them to put this on, and guess what? They're not dropping it. Now, we'll talk a little more about long lines. This is what replaces your retractable leash. This one's from EZYDOG. It is a, what they call their track and train leash. Got nice, lots of fur on it from being in the dog backpack. It has a little more grip to it. Predominantly what's important is their cotton. So these are one of my favorites for training and this and that. This is only a 15 foot. You can go on Amazon, you can get a 10 foot, 15 foot, 20 foot. I highly suggest nothing longer than 20 foot. You're gonna get tangled up, the dog's gonna get tangled up. Just make sure in any type of long training lead, it's not some kind of cable or anything. I don't want you wearing big old welding gloves to try to hold on to this cable, and I don't want it to hurt the dog. And if it's nylon, it's gonna burn through your skin. Cotton, it'll feel like it's gonna burn, but it's not gonna burn you. And that's what matters. We don't want the dogs or you to get hurt. And then we have harnesses. Now this is really cool, fancy harness. It has an attachment in the front, and always check any harness that if it does have attachment in the front, that it is sewn on really well. This attachment is sewn on just as well as these attachments are. A lot of harnesses that you'll get, they'll have the big thick metal loop at the top. That's where it's designed to hook your leash. And then they'll have a little plastic or not so well attached loop on the front. Don't trust those, because if the dog were to lunge or pull, I've seen them break and rip right off. This harness, one reason why I want this one out, number one, if you're pulling, if the dog is pulling and you're pulling on the harness, what you're really doing is you're putting pressure on the dog's chest and you're lowering their back end. This makes it easier for a dog to dig in and pull. You want to teach a dog to pull a sled, you put them in a harness. Harnesses are technically considered an advanced walking device, not a beginner. Now, when we're talking about puppies, yes, put them in a harnesses, let them explore. But when I'm teaching a dog not to pull on a leash, to know the heel command, to stay within a certain perimeter, this is confusing to a dog. Yes, we're connected to them really well, but we're not teaching them not to pull on our leashes, we're making it easier for them to pull, and then it makes it harder for us to explain to them what we want. I like this because the straps are completely under the dog's abdomen, and it has a nice handle on top. If you're out on some serious hike, you're not really sure about the terrain and this and that, to have a harness like that, that if needed, you can help pick your dog up, you can help them walk, and you're not just pulling here or on their neck, you're completely under their chest. Even his hiking pack that we use has a strap that goes up under his belly with the handle on top. Again, this has a good loop on the front. It's actually not as strong as this loop in the back, but this is more of an advance. We work up to this. This isn't just, oh, I'm going hiking, I need one of those hiking packs, and then your dog's dragging you all through the trails and we're not having any fun. And I want you to have fun. That's what this is all about. So now to the nitty-gritty. Understanding what the leash is supposed to mean to your dog and why it's there. The leash is there for one reason, because things happen, we drop our keys, we trip. I want to know that I'm holding on to my dog, that they're not going to get loose in an emergency situation. That's just emergency backup. But the leash is a communication device. So if the leash is loose, it means we're good. I got nothing to say. If the leash is tight, it means I want the dog to check in with me. Now you can use treats and we can teach the look at me command, and I can do another video on that, but basic leash. If the leash is loose, you're good. If the leash is tight, it means I want something. If we allow them to pull with any amount of consistent pressure, that now becomes neutral to the dog. That's baseline. So if they're walking along and pulling with 10 pounds of pressure, that's just normal, and they're gonna dig in and just keep pulling. And then I'm gonna need 12, 15, 16 pounds of pressure just to get their attention. The next phase is how we actually hold the leash. So the opposite side to the dog, I don't want it over your wrist. I don't want these leashes wrapped up. I want the end of the leash over your thumb and close your hand. Then if I need to switch hands, I can switch hands very easily, and it's a quick process. Then we have the part that's attached to the dog. I know you have two leashes on. The hand that's controlling the dog, doesn't matter which side the dog is on. If he's on my right, this is support, backup. This is what I talk to him with. Now, if I switch sides, this hand's over here, I'm driving with this hand. But the way we control the leash and how we hold the leash is extremely important. Whether we're using a long line, a nylon leash, a little rope leash, the way we hold that leash is everything. So the one thing for any of you that haven't done this, I want you to practice. I don't care if you take the leash and put it on the ground. Down there under my shoe is my dog, and I'm gonna practice with this leash. The way we hold the leash towards the dog, our thumb is always away from the dog. I never want to hold the leash like this. You know, watching me sitting down, it probably looks, this looks awkward, and this looks normal. Even when you're standing up, this is awkward. Because from a friction standpoint, you can see it's just laying there, and my thumb's right on top of it. If the dog pulls, I don't care how strong your hands are, the leash is gonna slide. If your hand is the opposite way from the dog, thumb away from the dog, and I want it in your fingers. You can see there, it's laying right more on my fingers, and I'm gonna lay my thumb on top. I lace my pinky in there. For any of you horse people out there, this is exactly how we hold horse reins. And we use our fingers, wrists, elbows, shoulders. So now the leash is right there. I close my hand. It takes very little for me to nudge that. If you're holding this way, you're doing this. You're bracing for the dog to pull you. You can do this in your living room, do it in your backyard, do it in places where there's not a lot of stimulation until you and the dog understand that this leash is supposed to mean something. And when I pull, it means I want attention. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to show him I'm in charge. It's the way we communicate. I want him to walk and look at the rabbit across the field where we're at right now. And if I need his attention, I bump and I have his attention. That's all I want. If he doesn't listen, I bump a little harder. If he doesn't listen, I might step in front. And we'll go through in another video on walking with your dog and how to avoid distractions and things like that. First phase is understanding the equipment that you have, the equipment that you're using, what it's supposed to be doing, what is it saying to our dogs, and do they understand what we're trying to say so we can go on our walks. Number one thing I tell all of the clients that I work with, quality over quantity. It's not always how far we hike. It's not always how far we go on our walk. And you're such a good boy. It's not about how far we walk in our neighborhood. It's nice to go on good long walks. They enjoy it, we enjoy it. But if we try to get them to do better on the leash while we're walking for 5 minutes, and then we say, oh, heck with it, and then we let them drag us the rest of the way, that's what we taught them. If we walk and walk and walk, and then they're finally doing better on the way back home, usually the spooky dogs will drag you back to the house, the ones that are scared of everything. And the ones that really like going for a walk, when they know they're going back, they start slowing down, not because they understood what you wanted, but because they just didn't want to go home yet. It's up to us to explain to our dogs what we're looking for. So what I'd like you guys to do is think about the tools that you're using now, and are they helping you or are they hurting you? Explain to your dogs what you actually want from them. And all I really want is, don't pull on my leash. I want to walk together. Holding our leash should feel just like holding someone's hand and going for a walk. If we just squeeze a little bit, they turn and say, what? We didn't learn that overnight. The dogs are excited. They're like a kid at Disneyland when they get to go out and go on a walk, when they get to go on an adventure. When my boys know that I'm packing up the backpack, they're excited. They're still not allowed, and I don't let them drag me to the car. I don't let them drag me down the trail. Not because I'm the supreme ruler, but because they could get hurt or I could get hurt. If I went somewhere with a group of, I don't know, when my daughter was little, I didn't let her drag me over the side of a cliff. It's our responsibility to make sure they feel safe and to make sure that we keep them safe. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about the Adventure Series as we start diving deeper into ways to work with our dogs so we can take them out to restaurants, take them on trips, take them on hikes, please like, follow, share, and subscribe to our channels. And any feedback you have, any videos you want to send me, please share. Thank you for watching.